Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this week's edition of Book Bites, an entertaining but a serious topic at the same time. Tonight's author is debut author Thabile Shange, who is a Durban-based journalist and has written this fascinating novel, In the Midst of It All, by NB Publishers, an extremely interesting range of topics covered through this, but not to, belie that at the same time, she's got a range of very fascinating characters of depth, characters that we can identify with, characters that you've come across in your life. To give you a bit about In the Midst of It All, this wonderful novel, Nandi finds herself in a complex situation as a relationship with her Nigerian lover, Femi Adewoyo, progresses. She needs to tell her very strict and prejudiced father about him. When Bav Kumalo learns who she's dating, his stubborn resistance is not the only thing threatening their happiness. An old flame from Femi's past enters the picture, leaving Nandi doubting his faithfulness and her place in his life. So it's a range of stresses and tensions carrying through the story. And we have the author to hear directly from how the structure and process of the story came about. Congratulations and welcome to the show, Thabile. It's so wonderful to have you this evening and to have this occasion to chat to you about this really, really wonderful novel.
Good evening, Shafinaaz. Thank you so much for having me.
So like to jump right into the depths of it, I mean, in the midst of it all, literally, there's a lot of weighted consideration given to the different dynamics that play out in this novel. Tell us right in the beginning your motivation for writing In the Midst of It All.
Well, my motivation or inspiration, if I should say, stems from my unhappiness of how South African women dating Nigerian men are stereotyped. There are things we are called things like gold diggers, uneducated, not having any value. And as someone who once has been in a relationship like that, I wanted to write something that I desperately wanted to read, and write something that would represent me correctly.
Well, it's very important. I mean, you're a journalist, you're a writer. You've used your craft also to document what you've observed and experienced. It's a beautiful thing. It's an empowering thing to speak in the voice that many, to deconstruct sort of stereotypes. But like when we look at stereotypes and we project this violence upon ourselves when we carry these stereotypes. What is it about? Like when we look at how xenophobia is played out at different pockets of time in our country, as a journalist, you've obviously documented that, and now you've put it into this vehicle of a fictional story. What was it like doing the research as well as presenting your own experiences through your personal and your political experiences through this?
While doing the research was, for me, the toughest part. As a journalist, I've seen such things in the newspapers and some of the articles that I've written before, but having to interview people who've gone through this experience was the hardest part for me. So a large part of my research was interviewing people who have experienced this. I wouldn't say I've had some of those experiences myself, because I focused more on how South African women who are dating Nigerian men are stereotyped. Yeah, so the research was a very important part of this book.
Right. And like we get the sense that television, like adds to the stereotype in a way. We sometimes refer to soapies that we watch, whether it's
Yeah.
local soapies or whatever the case may. And sometimes the information that gets passed down is the conversations we have with each other or what the older people say, even in terms of racism and stereotyping. But a lot of it is carried through in television. What we watch through
Mm,
television. So, like,
true.
how much of an influence is television? I think your characters also tend to watch, whether it's television here in South Africa or Nigerian television or across the continent, right? What impact does television have and what
Mm.
role does television have, do you think? just in a similar way to novels, to build those bridges in like breaking down stereotypes, maybe.
Well, I would say people are largely influenced by television, social media. Those things can influence like a lot of people, and it plays a big role in driving these types of stereotypes. For example, our soaps and movies, Nigerian characters are always portrayed as these criminals, these drug dealers. Even in the local soapies, if there's a Nigerian character, he's either a drug dealer or involved in some types of criminality. So yeah,
Right.
television and social media does drive a lot of these stereotypes.
And I think a novel like yours is an important pushback against stereotypes because you've presented very honestly the
I'm
kinds
sorry,
of
was there
things.
another part of the question?
We might be having a slight delay, but I'm just going to continue. So the pushback is important because what you're saying here is you're very honestly portraying and displaying the kind of stereotypical language, the stuff that people say, the derogatory stuff that people say, and it creates fear in the population, and at the same time. What I love about stories. We're able to draw bridges. We're able to engage empathy through our stories. So it's important to show all sides. And for the reader to be able to say, oh, but
Mm,
is this how we sound? Is this how we're behaving when we speak poorly about another person? And at the same time, there's a human side, a human element in each part of it. So the pushback is definitely very important. Your characters are very well drawn. Tell the audience about your characters, each of the characters in this book, and what you had in mind for them, because I enjoyed getting to know your characters.
Well, the book has two main characters, Nandi Nxumalo and Femi Adewoye. There's also two points of views, or POVs, as most people like to call them, two points of views. So the first one is Nandi and obviously Femi. Initially, the book was to be written on from Nandi's point of view, but then I found it was important to add another voice, Femi's voice, so the reader can get both perspectives in the story. How I would describe Nandi's character: she's a beautiful, bold young woman, full of spirits. She's a fire. That's how I could describe her. She's resilient and very brave, and she stands up for Femi. She's very extroverted. She's just a ball of fire. That's how I can describe that. I can describe her. And Femi on the other side is a bit opposite to Nandi. I like to call Nandi the fighter and Femi the lover, because he's
Right.
very much peaceful. When you've read the book, there were scenes where Femi had to stand up. I mean, Nandi had to stand up for Femi, and Femi was annoyed. He was telling her to just just calm down. I'm used to the discrimination, so there's not much that you can do. But Nandi wants to, fight. She wants to protect and stand up for her man. And Femi is just laid back. She's calm. He's calm. He's relaxed. Yeah. So it's two opposite people that who somehow come together and fall in love. There's a balance in the relationship.
Well, an important part of breaking the stereotype is that, every couple is not going to be the knight in shining armor saving the damsel in distress. And I
Yeah,
mean,
the
Nandi
way.
Nandi is a firecracker in every single way, but she's a deeply compassionate and feeling person. She wants justice. She wants to stand up for the rights of people, not just her own or not just her family. So she has that broadened perspective, and that comes through in all the decisions that she makes.
Yeah.
She's unapologetic. That's important because there are so many women like her around
I
us, and
actually look up to her. I want to be more like Nandi, although I do stand up for people who are discriminated against. That's one of my similarities that I have with her. But she is the woman that I aspire to be. That fiery spirit, that feistiness that's in her. She's really like one woman that I aspire to be.
Well, the wonderful thing is you've manifested her in the form of your story. And so I'm quite sure there's a spark that you've lit while writing this character, not
Mm.
just, for yourself as the content creator, but for so many of us
Definitely.
who will read and engage and get to know Nandi.
Mm.
And so that's quite fantastic. But Femi, there were
Mm.
points where I felt a little sad for him because being a victim of oppression, of discrimination, sometimes you stand back and take a backseat and say, I don't need to fight this battle. And I felt sad about that because
Mm.
it shows his disempowerment as well. Because he is willing to fight on certain
Mm.
issues, but there's almost an underlying fear, a self-preservation tactic. I don't know what it is exactly because our weakness is not to protect ourselves, but to protect those we love. We sometimes remain silent.
Mm.
And xenophobia was quite a heavy cloud, and it is something that was oppressive and is has potential to be hugely oppressive if we allow it to continue. So you captured
Mm.
those in your characters very, very well.
Thank you so much.
Um, there was even a scene where the cops ask for papers, and I've in my own research come across that as well.
Mm.
Another thing that takes us back and reminds us of apartheid times where, you know, um, as non-whites, we were meant to be documented for our movements through certain spaces. The fact that post-apartheid South Africa can still have remnants of that from
Mm.
our, officials is just,
Mm.
it's very triggering. The only
Mm.
thing is it's extremely triggering, and it still
Very
happens today.
still happens today, yes. But just to, and the sense to be an African in Africa and having to have that kind of experiences, it must be, tragic for a lot of people. The story might be fictional. I always tell people, I've been asked many times if there's any truth to the story, or if I relate in some way, or if the characters are based on people I know in real life. And the answer is no. As much as the book is fictional, it's a reality for many people in South Africa, for hundreds or even thousands of people in South Africa. Having to walk around, having documents in your pocket is just, and all kinds of discrimination. It's a real tragic, and it's very emotional, because at times when I wrote the story, I wrote it in the midst where there were xenophobic attacks happening in South Africa, and I sometimes used to pause, and not write for days because I was emotional about it. So as much as the book is pure fiction, it's a reality for many people in South Africa and around the world too, because xenophobia is not only in South Africa. On most parts of the world, people experience xenophobia.
Absolutely. I mean, we can have these conversations about how to build bridges, and definitely a novel of this nature is a step in the right direction because when we write in a report sense, if you're writing a research article or a journalistic article, people still read it in a kind of a removed way to say, well, it happens out there, it doesn't happen to me. It's
Mm.
it's it's still a little bit sort of okay, so this is information, but it happens out there. Novels have a very, very in a way, beautiful way of getting into the psyche of people, of allowing us better, deeper reflection, because we can see ourselves in those characters, the negative and the positive, and we can sort of stretch our imagination around how we can make better changes. And so it's important that novels like these are read widely by the youth, by all of us, by absolutely everyone who is able to get their hands on it, because of the kind of ongoing conversations we need around how to smash
Mm.
stereotyping, discrimination, racism,
Yeah.
and this remnants of xenophobia that we find rising every now and again in our society.
Yeah, and we also tend to run away from those conversations by denying that we are xenophobic or have some type of discrimination against some other people that are different from us. So it's important to read these kind of books. There are many books that are written about xenophobia by local authors, both fiction and nonfiction. So it's important for us to, read this kind of content and also engage in conversations that will take us forward instead of denying it. Because denying it, if we're denying it, if it's not happening, then if we're not xenophobic, then why are we still having recurring xenophobic attacks in the country? So it's important for us to sit down and have these types of conversation and, see how we move forward.
And it's also, I think, broader conversations need to be had about resources. I mean, it becomes such an easy political tool to create fear in people and to say, well, your jobs are being taken or your resources are being used up. When it's really the limitations of the state that's not providing or not creating or not acceding to the demands and requests and needs of a population. So scapegoating through xenophobia is something we really, really, really need to deal with. Let's talk about some of the sort of cultural aspects that come up that are interesting. So what happens, for example, when there are language barriers, right? In some cases, there are language barriers, and we get lost in translation when there's language barriers within clans, within, different sort of cultures within, like the sort of subcultures. And I found that there were barriers of language, for example, when Nandi and her sister have a conversation, like kind of girl talk in isiZulu, and then sort of boyfriend picks up on some of it. Those are the fun ones, but there are also serious conversations where Bab Kamalu is like attacking him, but he's not getting the full sense of it. So tell me about bridging those gaps in language barriers. I mean, what was it like to write? Because you captured it well. What was it like to write? You're writing an English novel and creating this atmosphere of what it's like to communicate and get lost in translation between, between the languages and the understanding of them.
Well, yeah, it is a English novel, but you'll find that there are some words that are in isiZulu, in Yoruba, sometimes Pidgin English, which is it's like slang Nigerian words, but it's not like full sentences. It's just words like "aibo," like that's a very popular word. Most Zulu people use. So I wrote those non-English words. I wrote them in such a way that the reader will know what's happening. They'll be included in the dialogue. So there's not
Right.
necessarily translation. Some authors like to write a word and then maybe put the meaning in brackets. But I wrote it in such a way that the author is included in the readers are included in the conversation. They know the sentence is structured in such a way that it's impossible for you not to know what it means, if you know what I'm saying. So that's
Oh,
how
that
it's
yes,
structured.
that definitely came through. I felt that it flowed. So it's definitely not a critique. I was more picking up on like when Femi overhears a conversation and then
Oh,
he's got to kind of he doesn't understand isiZulu, but he's picking up on certain
on
things,
the
right?
words. Yeah.
And then when he listens to Nandi's father kind of in his angry state or whatever. So there's that clash.
Yeah.
But part of survival, a part of our survival as a character, as a person, is to understand what's going on around us, especially if
Mm.
we're the subject of conversation. So I
You
found it
get
great
used
that
to
you were,
those words. If you get used to
yes, I
being
guess.
told something, you have to know what it means, right? So
No, so
I think
I
that's
was
how
just
Femi
commenting.
survived.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I was just commenting that you managed to capture that feeling of like slight confusion and then getting into it and understanding what it's about. So,
Thank you. That was the aim. So I'm glad that when someone gets it, it makes me happy.
so, so let's talk about Femi and his white lies. We don't have to give away content, but I mean,
Mm.
what a guy, right? Because at no point do I think he's doing it out of deception. And that's
Mm.
why I call it white lies. He thinks he's just handling his stuff and he forgets to communicate or decides not to communicate because he thinks he's protecting his partner. Let's talk about men and
Mhm.
white lies and how they think they're in control of the situation.
It annoys me sometimes. It really does annoy me because he says when he's being called out for those white lies, he says, I didn't feel the need to tell you, or he says, I'm just used to, carrying my crosses. I'm used to handling my own problems. And, I just wanted to protect you. I didn't want you to be upset. I didn't want you to be bad. Those kind of lies. It shows what kind of, many people would say Femi is perfect, but no one is perfect. So that's some of the imperfections Femi has in his character. He's not perfect. Some women might look at him as this dreamy character, but no, I mean he has his flaws, and the white lies are part of his flaws.
And it's true. I mean, what makes your characters, and this goes for writing in general, when you create full-bodied characters, what makes them real is to be able to show their light and dark. But at the
Mm,
same time, I keep feeling Nandi's frustration, because Femi is like one of those kids who's just trying to make everything right, and then they get into trouble because they just forgot to tell the whole story. And I think, masculinity also places a heavy yoke on men, because it just creates this impression that you got to handle your stuff.
mm,
Communication is not always a strong point for many of our men,
true.
because it's seen as like, if I'm going to complain about my stuff, it looks like I'm weak and I'm not able to handle my thing. And so
Mhm,
our patriarchal cultures do tend to create that. And he
mm,
learns to communicate, because it's frustrating for his partner to say, why don't you just
mm.
tell me so I can be
Yeah.
part of the solution, you know?
Yeah, and it creates a lot of misunderstandings too in their relationship. We see the fights that they have because of this white lie that he told. We see how many things would have been avoided if he just spoke the truth. So yeah, that's one of his flaws that is deeply highlighted in the novel.
So I want to just make it clear to people who are going to read this. This is also a relationship manual, especially if you want to learn more about
Wow,
communication and
wow,
what not to do.
wow! Thank you so much. That's a
Because
lovely
it's
way
so
to describe it,
instructive.
actually. That's a lovely way to describe it, a relationship manual.
It's so instructive when you're reading something and you're feeling this woman's frustration, because why didn't he just tell her? What was the big deal? It was not like he was doing anything wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
But he's already preempting her reaction, and then choosing to just like ignore it or keep quiet
mm,
about this and this and this. And then it like
mm.
later comes up and it looks worse because he covered up.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
And it
a lot
creates
of
a whole
relationships
big
suffer.
thing. Mm,
Yes, yes. A lot of relationships suffer when we keep things to ourselves, when commitment to each other is just about sharing, guys. Be like, don't be shy to share.
don't be to tell them. I hope they understand this. Yeah.
And this is exactly what happens when we watch all these soapies, right? You're sitting there as an audience saying, why didn't he just tell her? And so your book
Mm,
gives that kind of feeling when you're getting to know the characters. You're like, guy,
mm,
I can see this is not going to go well for you. Why don't you just tell her now?
just exactly, exactly. And I know a lot of readers are going to be frustrated with him for that. But it's part of his character, and I love that he grows. In the book, we see him actually, making efforts to be more open to Nandi, and which is a beautiful thing. People need to grow and not just stay where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your hopes? I mean, this is a new novel. It's just come out. How has it been received so far? And what are your hopes for this book?
Well, the reception for the book has been lovely. It's been amazing. It was released on the 23rd of September this year. And the reception has
Right.
been wow. I'm grateful for the support that I've been receiving. People are engaging on the content that I'm sharing, especially on TikTok. I just joined TikTok, and it's a lovely app. Book Talk is amazing. I encourage people to be on TikTok. Yeah. I've also been getting a lot of messages, from women saying how much they relate to the storyline. Most of them haven't read the book. They promised to buy it, and they haven't read the book, but obviously they've seen the blurb, and they tell me how much they relate to the story, how much they relate to Nandi being in a relationship with a foreign national, and they're not necessarily in relationships with Nigerian men. It's Zimbabwean men or men from all over the African continent. I'm saying the African continent because no one is really shamed. Let's be honest. No woman is shamed for dating a European or an American man. So it's women who are in relationships with these African men from other African countries that are being shamed, and they tell me how much they relate to the storyline. And yeah, and it fills my heart with joy, to hear messages and reviews like that.
And I think this book will be
And my
popular with all book clubs.
sorry, with
With book clubs.
oh yeah, I'm hoping to get a lot of invitations from book clubs.
Well, I think we're going to see the story growing as it reaches more readers. Like I said, I definitely think that book clubs will enjoy this book because, it reads in an entertaining way while dealing with aspects that we can relate to in different ways. It's a conversation starter for many of the topics that will come out: relationships, xenophobia, living our days through South Africa, and as I said, it's a communication manual, so people should be picking it up
Hmm.
for,
Yeah.
if any
And
reason,
it's a romance
some of
novel
those
too,
tips.
so
It's a beautiful romance novel as well. Yes.
thank you.
Sabilia, thank you so much for giving us your time this evening. I thoroughly enjoyed our chat.
Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed your book, and I wish you everything of the best on your journey ahead.
Thank you so much. I really had a fantastic time. And just to add, the book is available at all leading bookstores nationwide, exclusive books, bargain books, CNA. It's also available on Takealot if you don't live near a bookshop. And also on online bookshop, if you just search In the Midst of It All by Thabile Shange, it should give you websites that have the book in stock.
Absolutely fantastic. I know a lot of our readers are shopping online, and they'll be definitely picking up copies of your proudly South African story.
Thank you.
Everything of the best once again. Thank you for this evening's chat, and all of the best from us on the Book Bites team this evening.
Thank you so much, Shafinaaz. Enjoy the rest of your night too.
Thanks so much. You too. And so there you have it. We chatted to Thabile Shange, author of the debut novel, In the Midst of It All. I urge you to get a copy, get your book clubs reading. And that's it from us this evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.